Well, good evening. It is so wonderful to have you back. I have once again compiled some horror stories that I have narrated for your enjoyment. It is a beautiful, however, very frigid day today, which is unfortunately quite common where I live. But nevertheless, I made sure to get this out for your enjoyment, and I would like to thank you for watching. It means very much to me. Now, as usual, grab yourself a snack, sit back, and relax and hope that tonight will not be your last. So for context, I moved into my new house about a year or two ago. I had lived in the area for a year before we were evicted due to the owners of our old house wanting to move in. I'm a young female, still living with my family, which makes this story even more weird. When you look out my window, you see my fence and then a house. They are up on a small hill, so the fence does not block anything. The first encounter I had with this man was late at night. I was with some friends while all our parents were out at a party. I will say that me and my friends are old enough to be left at home. We were responsible. We were just relaxing in my room with no light or music on. We had turned the TV off when we were alone. We heard my dog start barking for a good 10 minutes. We passed this off because she barks at absolutely everything. I'm talking birds on the power line, bug on the front porch, anything that moves pretty much. We started hearing more weird noises like crunching circling the perimeter of my room and scratching on the walls. I kid you not, the moment we start getting scared, the loudest bangs I had ever heard start pounding on my glass sliding door. Me and the three others run out of my room to go look at what in the world could be making this much noise. We were greeted by an aggressive dog. This dog was up on the glass pounding on the door. My dog was scared. She usually doesn't do this, but she actually backed up away from me into my room with her fur up. Then we see it. A man, dressed in all black, standing at the door. We were all standing perfectly still, but I guess my friend's flight response went off, and just as he jumped to lock the door, the man reaching for it too. My friend yelled, "What are you doing here? Who are you?" He responded with a simple, "I don't know," and walked off with his dog, who was on a leash. When our parents got back, we told them about him. They asked us why we didn't call them. Truthfully, I know we should have, but I didn't want to ruin Mom's birthday party. I have learned from this. 2 days later, my mom confronted our neighbor who was mowing the lawn. He said that if it was in fact him and that his dog had run to our gate and he got the dog back. He said he'd meant to come and talk to her earlier about it, but didn't. I thought it was a normal story until I thought back to that night. The gate that this dog supposedly ran through was a top class that was shut on that night. We have it there so our dog can't get out and nothing can come in, but you can open it by hand, meaning that this man opened the gate and let himself and his dog in. My theory is that he heard the music stop and didn't see lights from his house, so he decided that he was going to come and, I don't know, rob us? The noises we heard must have been him scaling the perimeter of my room for 10 minutes before attempting to enter. We filed a police report and nothing happened for a few months until one night. I was in bed, almost asleep, but still getting comfy. I sat up to rearrange my pillows and turned around so I could properly make it comfy when I saw a face outside my window staring back at me. Whoever it was wearing a black face covering, so I texted my mom and froze. I heard moving and then my mom came and checked. Nothing there. This wasn't just my imagination, as my neighbor's lights are visible from the crack in my curtain, but the face was covering a majority of the light. Ever since then, I had noticed them watching, and whenever I catch them looking, they get up from their balcony and leave. I'll catch them in the same spot watching only 5 minutes later. So I'm a 28 years old woman, and this happened to me when I was 13. I'm an adult now and still kind of traumatized. For a little context, at 13 I transferred schools because of lack of money. The school I went to was a cheaper private school because where I lived the public ones kind of sucked. I didn't have any friends for at least the first couple of months. I started noticing this boy, Victor. He was always staring at me during classes, in the hallways by the window, and at lunch. It was an everyday thing, but I didn't care because as a kid I only thought of stupid stuff like dolls or whatever. Oh, and one more thing. I was flat as a table back then, so totally looked like a small child. The girls in my class started saying that Victor had a crush on me, which creeped the hell out of me because he was 18. I was creeped out, but still don't care, as long as he didn't approach me or anything. But things escalated quickly. Victor would follow me home every day. Thank God I moved since then and he doesn't know where I live anymore. The most annoying thing, however, was that he constantly asked his friends to try to talk to me and try to convince me to go out with him and make out with him after school. These talks would usually take about 30 minutes of them trying so hard to convince me to agree with this, while Victor was behind them watching the conversation like a freak. Obviously, I rejected him all the time, but being the nice guy that he was, he spread rumors about us making out anyway. Nobody believed any of it because he was such a weird guy and the whole school knew it. The final straw was when our school had a trip to a book fair. I was super excited. At this point, I had made a couple of friends. On our way to this fair, I was on the bus with my friend and Victor was on 3 seats behind us and I could feel his eyes on me the whole way. Out of nowhere, he came and asked for my friend's cell phone and she gave it to him. So stupid of her. He returned her cell phone not even 2 minutes after. She checked the cell phone and showed me he had taken a bunch of photos of me. I guess this was his way of saying that he had already done this at some point. She got so pissed and went to go talk with him. When she returned, she said the creepiest thing I've heard in my life. She said this with a very scared face. He said to me that when you least expect it, he will push you into a bathroom and do horrible things to you. Today. The only thing that went through my mind was, what should I do now? I looked at him and he gave me a creepy smile. After this, I spent the whole day looking behind my back, not leaving the side of my teacher. She didn't even understand why I wouldn't want to walk around at the fair. I was in alert mode all the time and thank God nothing happened. When I came home, I cried in my room like a baby. This was at the end of the year and thankfully I switched schools again. I told this to my mom last year and she was like, yeah, it happens. It happened to me too when I was your age. So, shocked about how this is such a common thing. I'm now 28 and I still see Victor on the streets. He has followed me around a few times. I always walk in circles until I lose him, but sometimes he waits for me outside the stores or restaurants. I think about what would have happened to me in the book fair if I didn't have my teacher next to me the whole time. And I wondered if one day he'll do something like this or just keep this creepy behavior to himself. So I had a best friend in high school named Lena. We were friends for about a year and a half, and we would spend almost every weekend at her house listening to music, watching scary movies, and gossiping. She was just a little bit crazy, the type of girl to beat up her boyfriend's exes unprovoked. She actually did that once. And catfish people. I say we were best friends, but actually it was more like I looked up to her and she liked that and she could boss me around and hang out with me whenever she pleased. She was extremely manipulative and two-faced. She had a hobby of being nice to girls at school and then going on their social media and making fun of everything they posted. She would befriend people just to get information out of them. When we were friends, Lena was dating this guy named Nolan. They dated for about a year and a half and had lots of troubles the last 6 months or so. He would go out drinking most weekends and she would cry in the middle of the night and blow up his phone, yelling at him and making him feel guilty. She was borderline psychotic when it came to his exes of the girls he was friends with, and they just weren't really working out, but they stayed together anyway. At some point, Nolan got Lena pregnant, and one of her other friends, whose name was Autumn, became pregnant at the same time from the guy I was in love with. Naturally, I wanted nothing to do with Autumn, but because they were pregnant together, Lena started hanging out with Autumn most weekends and neglected our friendship. After about a month, I became fed up with her and started ghosting her. At first, she tried to apologize, but I was not having it, since the other girl was dating the guy I'd been in love with for 2 years, and I was jealous and childish. So eventually, Lena got pissed at me and stopped trying. A few months went by and Lena had the baby. Nolan and Lena stayed together to take care of their son, but their relationship was absolutely horrendous at that point. Lena cheated on him, and Nolan decided he wanted out of the relationship but continued to see his son and buy things for him. However, Lena and her mother made things very difficult for him by constantly changing the days he could see his son and refusing to let him take his son anywhere besides the house. Lena's mother would also throw out Christmas presents from Nolan, ignore his phone calls, and eventually told him he wasn't allowed at the house. Nolan begged for months to see his son, but it was clear Lena and her mother didn't want him in the picture. Nolan offered to pay child support, but they didn't want that either. They just wanted him gone, so he stopped trying. And apparently, even that was not what he wanted. Lena took to social media to talk about how he was such a deadbeat. She told everyone she knew that being a single mother was really hard and the baby daddy refused to take care of his kid. A year after they broke up, I met Nolan in person. We had been talking online for a couple months about Lena. We had shared stories about her crazy meltdowns and her manipulative tendencies, and we talked about the time he came to her house while I was there and attempted to scare her by jumping out while she went to the front door, but instead accidentally jumped out at me. He thought it was the funniest thing ever that my face stayed stone cold and I just said, "Sup." We had a similar sense of humor, and at the time I had no one. I had just come out of the worst depressive episodes of my life. It had lasted for a good year, and I had dropped out of school, been doing drugs, isolating myself for weeks at a time, and considering suicide. He was the one to help bring me back from the brink. He was kind, and he was my support system. We were just friends at first. When Lena caught wind of our friendship, she reacted out to me. At this point, we hadn't been friends for a year and a half. We caught up and talked about what had been happening in our lives. She asked what was going on with Nolan, and I told her we were just friends. Everything seemed fine. That's when her erratic behavior started. She would randomly block me on social media and then unblock me a month or 2 later. Sometimes we would talk, like, "How are you? Everything good?" Then the next day I'm blocked. At one point, I asked one of her friends to get her to tell me why she was doing it because I was very confused. So she unblocked me and told me she was salty about the situation with Nolan and the fact that I was friendly with him. I asked her why she kept making up with me and then suddenly getting pissed again and cutting me off. I told her I was tired of thinking things were only good for her to turn around and pretend like we had never said anything to each other. That's when she said she could block me again or keep me unblocked. Whatever I wanted was fine, but she felt I had done her wrong by abandoning her during her pregnancy and befriending her ex-boyfriend. So, then I tried to explain to her why Nolan was my friend. I tried to tell her that Nolan was all I had in the darkest time of my life. I tried to tell her why her neglecting me for Autumn hurt my feelings, but she wasn't having it. I understand where she was coming from, I do. And I acknowledge the fact that I acted childishly and in a cruel way, but I had tried to make up with her multiple times. I tried really hard, and she couldn't even stick with whether she could forgive me or not, so I told her to block me again and be done with it. She told me she wouldn't block me again, and if she gave me her blessing with Nolan. She said she was fine if we wanted to date, and said she hoped I had a good life, and I said the same to her, and I really meant it. We had a bad end, but I was glad we could at least wish each other well. It was a few months after I last spoke to her that Nolan and I started dating. I had waited so long because I was worried about Lena, even though we weren't friends anymore. But she had given me her blessing and she was dating someone new, so I went with it. It was around this time that I received a friend request from a girl on Facebook named Casey. She said she lived in a big city in my state, and since we had mutual friends and I had once gone to the school in that city, I assumed we had gone to school together and I just didn't remember her. She seemed like a real person. She claimed to work at Hooters, had made posts about how her workdays went, had several pictures with the same girl, and made frequent posts about her ex-boyfriend. I accepted the friend request and she messaged me telling me how pretty she thought I was. I thanked her and told her to message me anytime she wanted to chat. For the next few months I was clueless. I went about my regular life, posting about the things me and Nolan did, getting my GED, hanging out with friends, visiting my mother, etc. Occasionally I would see strange posts on my timeline from Casey, but didn't think much about it because I had over 1,000 friends on Facebook and I rarely saw them. There were mostly posts about how much she hated her baby daddy and how her line of work sucked. But there were two posts in particular that caught my eye. One was a post that seemed to be referencing something I had posted the day before, and the other was of her saying, "We all know a dirty hoe named blank with my first name in the blank." So I went to her profile and then clicked through months and months of posts. Some were about her line of work. Everything else was related to me and Nolan. Everything. There were posts of her complaining about her deadbeat baby daddy buying things for everyone but his kid. Posts about how sad she felt about the breakup. Posts about how she missed me and thought of me as a sister, which is bullshit, and I'll explain why later. Posts about how I stole her boyfriend, also bullshit. And a myriad of posts shit-talking me. She made fun of my hobbies, had directly referenced some of my posts, talked about how much she hated me, said I was a dirty hoe, and in her later posts even went so far as to put my initials or first full name in the posts. She even had people in the comments egging her on, talking shit too, even though no one knew who she was talking about, but I did. She even mentioned things only two of us knew. She referenced our past experiences. It was undoubtedly Lena. I messaged Casey and told her I knew it was Lena. She played dumb and told me the initials were of another girl she knew. When I looked up the name she gave me, not a single person on Facebook had that name. When I told her that, she brushed it over it and tried to get me to talk about Lena. So I played along and talked hardcore shit about Lena. I lied about a lot of things in an attempt to get her to out herself, but in the end all she did was send a screenshot of our conversation to Lena's account, in an attempt to make it look like Casey was real and was trying to help Lena out by showing what kind of person I was. Casey then immediately deleted her account. She didn't block me, she deleted it. I had a friend and my dad check and neither of them could find Casey's profile. So then another month went by and I found out she had reactivated the account. And because I can't block a deleted account, she was in my friends list again and had access to my profile for who knows how many days. So I blocked her. She then sent me friend and follow requests on 3 other websites under the Casey name, which I also blocked. It was around that time that me and Nolan began to get a lot of friend requests from obviously fake accounts. We would report them and block them and try to pretend she wasn't going insane. One of these fake accounts was extremely obvious because it had poked both me and Nolan on the same day, at the same time. She was taunting us, I guess. I blocked that account too. Please be aware that at this time, Lena had married her boyfriend. She was doing this while married to someone else. A year later, I thought it had stopped, and One day I went to the Casey account on my friend's Facebook because I wanted to see if she was still posting about me, and when I scrolled down I realized I had missed a post last time. This post was Lena mocking the fact that my mother, yes, my birth mother, called her frequently to talk shit about me and give her information on me and Nolan. Turns out my mother and Lena went to the same college, and my mother thought that what better way to make friends than helping someone stalk my daughter. She would ask me about mine and Nolan's relationship often. She talked shit about Lena and would act like the perfect mother to my face. She didn't raise me, so I didn't trust her 100%. For that reason, I never gave her my phone number, address, or any other permission that I felt was private. When my dog went missing, she tried to convince me to post my address on Facebook. She kept saying how important it was that people knew exactly where he went missing from. What horse shit. Thank God I didn't, because I might have woken up to Lena punching my head in, or worse. For a while there, I was legitimately paranoid. Every time I went to the store or went outside, I was watching my surroundings closely, because if Lena was willing to beat the shit out of a girl Nolan had dated for 3 weeks, unprovoked, what would she do to me if she saw me in public? Would she kill me? I had never met someone so obsessive. Let me just say that Lena was a horrible friend. She was manipulative, bossy, judgmental, rude, erratic, narcissistic, and two-faced. When I felt my first heartbreak, she spent all night talking shit about the guy, saying I deserved better. Eventually I talked shit with her to make myself feel better. Then what does she do? She messages him on Facebook and tells him everything I said about him. She guilt-tripped me about having other friends. She convinced me to abandon one of my friends just because she didn't approve of her. She would ignore me when there were other people around. If I complained about anyone, she would go tell that person what I said, even if she had something worse about them. She would go through people's Facebooks and laugh at them and talk about how dorky they were, and not in a nice way. This person is scum for being a dorky, by the way. She would make me feel ridiculous for liking the things I did, and I never felt like I could be myself around her. It amazes me how many people Lena has manipulated. Even her poor husband probably doesn't know she has a stalker. So yeah, there you have it. Lena cyberstalked me for 2 years, and if I had given my mother my address, it might have actually become real stalking. She hasn't been trying to stalk me for a while now. I cut my mother off and deleted all but 40 people off my Facebook and made all my social media accounts private to keep this from happening again. I'm hoping I'm never heard from Lena again. The least obvious sign I've gotten to her still trying to stalk me is a fake account that sent me a friend request about 3 months ago. An account that was a few months old, had the same last name as my friend who told me he didn't know her, and had only liked 2 Facebook pages, one of which was a grocery store page and the other was my page. My obscure Facebook page. My page that had spaces in between the letters and Japanese letters in the name. My page that you have to either know the exact name of or have a link to find. My page that I had already had to ban Lena and Casey from because both accounts had also liked it. Sometimes I wonder if Lena is even trying to be secretive or if she's just stupid. At least her attempts are few and far between now, so I don't consider her to be stalking me anymore. My girlfriend's mother is a long-time heroin user and has been in and out of jail for my girlfriend's whole life. When she lived with her mother and husband, she witnessed physical abuse and drug activity. She was forced to move out at a very young age in order to stay alive. She thought her mother was finally clean when her mother announced her pregnancy. After getting over the initial shock, my girlfriend decided to be supportive of her mother since she thought she was clean. That was until her mother overdosed while pregnant. She decided to cut all contact at that point. My girlfriend is also a mandated reporter and last year reported her mother and her mother's husband to the state since she knew it wasn't a safe situation for the baby. The baby died in their house not even a month after birth due to an overdose with signs of physical abuse. My girlfriend's mother was arrested for the murder of her baby and other charges her husband was arrested for, child endangerment and other charge very recently. At first, the judge did not grant either of them bail. Eventually, her husband was granted bail, in which he posted. We did not know this until recently, which helped us put some of the pieces together. My girlfriend and I like to sit outside her house in the car and just chat or listen to music. Recently, there have been black cars around my girlfriend's house. She is also frequently followed by black cars when she drives me home. It's the same couple of black cars that do this, they're not just random ones. At first we thought we were just paranoid since everyone was still in jail, but when we found out that the husband was out of jail, we began to doubt our insanity. The first major thing happened after my girlfriend and I went on a dinner date. We got home after dark and sat in her car for about 45 minutes before we noticed the same black car passing by us every few minutes. After 10 minutes of that, a different car drove towards us, flicking its high beams on when it got close enough for us to see who was inside. It swerved into the oncoming lane, and I genuinely thought it was going to hit the passenger side of the car. It sped away and we ran inside. After that, we started noticing the black car more and more. This past Wednesday morning, around 3 a.m.-ish, the same distinct black van that we had been seeing pulled up outside of my house. This was weird because my girlfriend and I live about 30 minutes from each other in two separate cities. A man got out of the van and shined a flashlight through my yard, scanning if almost. He shined the flashlight up at the window I was sitting at, kept it there for a second, then walked 30 feet to an empty driveway, scanned around there for 20 seconds before getting in the van and peeling away. The windows were ice-covered and frozen, so I couldn't make out the specifics of the van, but it was strange. A few nights later, my girlfriend and I spent some time hanging out in the car when we spotted a black van hiding behind another parked car further up the street. We could only see one headlight, but it creeped by us as we sat in the car. My girlfriend lives between two dead-end streets. The van went up the first dead end, 4 ways on, and sat for a few minutes before turning around and driving almost into the other lane of traffic to get close to us. It then went up to the other dead end and stayed put. We thought it was weird that the van just backed up out of the first dead end, instead opting to drive all the way up the narrow street and turn around. After a few minutes, we call a friend and recount the story just to get an extra opinion. While my girlfriend was talking to her friend, I got out of the car to go for a cigarette and to see how far away the van was. I walked up the dead end that the van was on for about 15 feet before getting the worst gut feeling I'd ever gotten. Across the street from me was a black mass, which was darker than the darkness around it. I decided to just turn around and rush my girlfriend into the house. Later that night, we heard a bang coming from downstairs, followed by what sounded like a boot on wooden stairs. We locked the bedroom door and I sat against the door with a baseball bat, hoping to barricade it. A few minutes later, we heard a car door slam before the sound of tires squeezing and a car driving away. Our initial idea was that maybe it came from the TV, but we had paused it and the TV in the next room was never loud enough to feel that real. When I went downstairs an hour later to get water, there was nothing damaged or missing. We theorized that maybe it was the sound of the front door trying to be opened, even though it was dead-bolted. My girlfriend's exterior wall doesn't face the road, and we've never heard car sounds before. It is, however, next to a private driveway, and sometimes we'll hear her grandparents' car door close or the neighbors backing out. The next day, I was shoveling sidewalks at my girlfriend's house, and I saw the same black Chevy Silverado with mud streaks on its tailgate. I circled the block about 4 times, and I was able to see the silhouette of the man driving through the passenger side window, and each time it was the same man and same truck. My girlfriend lives in a small town, and we were able to catalog the neighborhood cars. The black van and truck are abnormal. Our theory is that someone is trying to scare my girlfriend into not testifying, or flat out making sure neither of us had the ability to testify. So I'm female. In this story, I was 21 with a 4-month-old baby. I'm about 5'9", a bit overweight, and I have social anxiety around new people. I went with my sister, 26, to her work, as she worked at a very nice restaurant in a shopping center, and we went straight there for her 6 p.m. start after being in the city all day collecting money for a cat rescue. I'm just chilling out, eating good food, and binging on Reddit when I decide I want to smoke. I know, it's a bad habit. So I pack up the kidlit and let my sister know I'm going out to the car park to have a smoke as she passes through the dining area. The car park was about 70 meters away from the restaurant, had good lighting, and because it was so late I could hang out near the doors. This is where it gets creepy. The security guard was doing his rounds, about my height, and Indian, not a racist, but most of my experience with Indians in particular have not been very good. He decides to check on me. That's cool, man. I'm just having a smoke. The conversation went something like this. So, how you doing? You okay? I'm pretty good. Just waiting for my sister to get off work. Good, good. Your baby. Very cute baby. I have 4 at home. Have you got a husband? Yes, he's my baby. That's good. I have a fiancé, which was a complete lie. I was 100% single, but he was already making me anxious. I can be your husband. I'll look after the baby for you. I'll look after you. No thanks. I'm sure your wife wouldn't appreciate that. No, no. My wife will love the baby. My wife will love you. You come home with me? No thanks. I'm gonna go now. He then follows me inside. I go all around the mostly closed shopping center, hoping to lose him in Kohl's. I lost him for about 5 seconds, but Kohl's had shut for the night. The only place left open was my sister's work, so I went back there even though I didn't want him to know where I was. As I was about to walk into the restaurant, I saw him coming up the escalator. He was still watching me. I take the last 2 steps towards the hostess, who happened to be the owner's daughter, and told her what was going on. At this point, the security guard is standing in front of the restaurant, still staring at me. The hostess takes me to a semi-secluded booth and goes to talk to her dad about the situation. As she's gone, creepy security guard came into the dining area, searched for me, and then came and sat in my booth, way too close to me and my child. So, how old are you? I want to ravish you, pretty woman. You be the mother to my babies. We'll make some cute babies. At this point, it was very clear that I was very uncomfortable. He still made it worse. Don't worry. I'm security. I'll protect you and your baby. He's reaching across the table with one hand now. The other hand is reaching towards my palm. I'm frozen. I don't care about the hand near me. I'm watching the other one. Nobody touches my baby. I'm about to snap, go full mama bear mode, when the owner of the restaurant steps in asking if there's a problem. Is there a problem here? No, no problem. Just talking to my lovely lady. This is a customer. Has she done anything wrong? No, never. She's my lady, see? We're going to get married. He makes a creepy grin. The silent warning to play along is etched into his face. I just want to eat my dinner. Haha, funny lady. We can see you're joking. I don't know you. Please leave me alone. She says she wants you to leave now. She's just messing. She loves me. I'll be waiting for you, my pretty lady. He leaves at that point. The owner makes sure I'm okay and moves me to the employee break room and fills my sister in. 2 hours later, and my sister has finished her shift. We pack up and head to the car. The same guy appears out of nowhere. He was actually waiting for me. So I take Pretty Lady and her baby home now. Come on, Pretty Lady. Let's go home. She's going home with her sister. No, Pretty Lady mine. She's coming home with me. Get in the car. I'll take care of him, the boss says, and I get into the car and go home. I found out the next day from my sister that her boss had physically restrained the man because he went to grab my arm as I was getting in the car, and then got him fired and permanently banned from that shopping center. What a creepy security dude. This happened literally a month ago, back in February, when my boyfriend and I had decided to try out an open relationship for a little while for various reasons. We live in one of the larger cities in the north of Middle America, and there's a decently sized population of college students like me to keep the gay community fresh, so I was doing pretty well for myself. One night, I was bored and scrolling through Grindr looking for an easy hookup when I got a message from a guy who was barely 800 feet away. He wasn't terrible looking, and I was a little desperate, so I agreed to go to his place. He lives quite literally down the street from me. I can see his building from my window, so I walked over and he let me up into his apartment. We made small talk and I mentioned where I lived. Hell, I even pointed out my window from one of the windows in the stairwell. From the first, I thought there was something off about the guy. Not necessarily bad, just different. An odd twitch in his hands when he gripped the banister, the vacancy of his eyes when he smiled. I'm not so cliche as to say he felt evil or anything like that, but I wasn't exactly surprised that, after we got to his apartment, the first thing he did was to tell his very pretty and friendly cat to say hello, and the second thing he did was to walk over to the kitchen counter, grab a needle, and shoot up. I hadn't even closed the door behind me. I stood there staring, and he turned around, dropped the needle on the counter, and said, "Oh shit, man, should have asked you. You cool with that?" I'm not a good Christian boy. I have broken into a church while tripping on LSD. I had sex on a headstone back in high school. But I have my standards, so I shook my head mutively, pulled my hat back on, and opened the door to leave. The guy rushed over and put a hand on my shoulder. "Yo, I'm sorry, you don't gotta go. We don't gotta do anything. Do you wanna watch Transformers with me or something?" "Nope," I said bluntly, hustling away down the stairs. I bundled my scarf against the early winter chill and hurried back down the street to my apartment. He followed me downstairs, barefoot, in pajama pants and a t-shirt, until I stepped outside into the whipping winds. I turned back briefly to look after a moment, and he was still standing there in the doorway, watching me. I didn't have any premonitions of doom or weirdness. I grew up in Missouri. Junkies barely register as odd to me by this point, so I went home and went to bed. Now you might have guessed it, but I'd never seen this dude around my neighborhood before. Truthfully, I hadn't seen most of my neighbors because my neighborhood is an odd mixture of white-collar suburbia, college housing, and low-income housing like my paramour's building, all on one street, so it didn't really register when I started seeing him more. I would leave for work in the afternoon and he'd be on the other avenue across from my building, strolling along. Or he'd cut across my building's parking lot like all the kids in the neighborhood did. A couple times, I saw him walking across the campus mall, but he'd always swerve to avoid me. Once or twice I'd notice him in the grocery store I work at as a barista, but it's the only one within walking distance, and he mentioned he didn't have a car. This went on for the entire month of February. Eventually, I started noticing. He'd always been walking down the street opposite my building when I left for work at my usual time, and he was only ever at the store when I was working. He'd never approach the coffee stand within the store, but he'd look at me. A couple of times I noticed him enter, look at me, pretend to shop, and leave without buying anything. I was starting to feel creeped out, but he hadn't done anything yet to make me feel particularly unsafe. One day in late February, I worked an early shift. When I got off, I was feeling a little crazy from lack of sleep, and I reached my place by about 20 minutes before I usually leave for work. And on the corner of the sidewalk opposite of me was the guy. He was checking his watch over and over again and looking up. I did a bit of brilliant deductive analysis and followed his gaze up to my living room window. Then I looked back down at him. He looked right at me. There was a moment of tension as we stared each other in the eyes. Like I said, this dude didn't give off any evil or dark vibes. I've met people that do. No, what I saw in his eyes, in his face, was much more human and much scarier. Depression, loneliness, pain, and anger. He hurried after me, but I'm 6'3" and a former sprinter, whereas he was a 5'8" junkie wearing flip-flops on ice. I made it to the first step of doors in my apartment, scanned myself in through the second, and locked them in behind me. He walked through the first unlocked set, tried to open the second, tried pushing the handicap button to open them, and then gave up. "Look, man, I'm sorry," he shouted, laying a hand on the glass of the door. "Can we talk about it?" I shook my head. "Absolutely not. Leave me alone." Then I rolled on my heel and stomped over to the elevator. When I turned back, he was gone out into the snow. I didn't see him for a couple weeks afterward, which is nice because my boyfriend likes to walk down the street past the dude's apartment when he needs to stay over and needs to go smoke. One night, my boyfriend was over at my place. He'd just gone out to smoke before we went to bed, and he mentioned that he wanted me to come with him next time he went out. "Why?" I asked, pulling him close to me while he shivered. "It's dark and cold and I get paranoid out there sometimes. There's this creepy dude that sometimes stands on the corner across the way and just stares at the building. One time he asked me for a cig and I told him I don't have one when I literally had one in my hand. He laughed, kissed my chin, and passed out. I lay there awake, troubled. When I was sure my boyfriend was deeply asleep, I extricated myself and went to the window. It was a cold and clear night. I could see across the street, under the orange glow of the streetlight, was the guy. I couldn't make him out clearly, but when he saw me, he waved. I flicked him off and closed the blinds. I didn't feel like I should tell my boyfriend because he was either going to immediately go to the police, which I hated doing, or he'd try and defend me. And while I love him with my entire heart, I don't want to watch a fight between a junkie stalker and my underweight, nicotine-addicted boyfriend. So I kept it to myself and still haven't told him. But I did start accompanying him when he went out to smoke. The guy was usually outside. Sometimes he'd follow us for a bit before ducking away down a side street. Sometimes he'd watch from a distance. Sometimes he'd be up in his apartment. My boyfriend never noticed. I kept my composure and nothing happened. One night, though, we went out so my boyfriend could smoke, like normal. When we'd reached the end of the street and turned around, the stalker was behind us, about 50 feet back. I turned my head to check, and there he was. He waved at me again, and something told me I had to get back inside. "Hey, babe, let's get back inside, yeah? I'm cold." "Oh, okay," he said, kissing me on the cheek. "Okay, I'm almost done anyway." We walked back to the apartment building, and without turning, I knew that the stalker was behind us the entire time. I kept my hand intertwined with my boyfriend's and kept up the casual conversation we've been having about how I hate geese. We got back up to my apartment, and he got changed for bed while I grabbed some water. So I've never lived in an apartment before, and I don't know if it's odd or not, but this building has a wired telephone in each unit that rings when someone wants let in. Ours never rings unless it's Uber Eats. So my boyfriend was surprised when it started ringing late at night when neither of us had ordered anything. Probably just some asshole playing a prank, I said, unhooking the phone from the wall and putting it in the kitchen cabinet. He accepted that without a struggle, and we laid down in bed. After he was soundly out, I got up, got dressed, grabbed a couple things, and headed downstairs in my thick winter coat. Sure enough, my fanboy was out there in the parking lot. He waved at me and jogged over, smiling broadly. "Hey, man." "What do you want?" I said, flatly. "Look, man, I feel like we ended things awkwardly last time, and I just wanted to talk to you." "So you stalked me?" "What?" He started to look angrier, his brows furrowing. "Nah, man, I didn't stalk you. I just wanted to know when I could talk to you, but you always avoid me. Now you're walking around out here with that skinny little boy, trying to rub it in my face, and I don't appreciate that. Look, man, you want to go talk about this back at my place? Ditch the white boy and come hang out with me tonight? Please? I won't shoot up or nothing this time." He took another step closer toward me. I saw in his right hand a dully gleaming piece of metal, a folded up switchblade. He smiled at me and I stepped back, shaking my head. His smile drained away into a deep scowl. "I'm done asking. You're gonna come over to my place now and finish what we started," unfolding a knife and pointing it at me as he growled. This dude was 5'8" and skinny. I'm 6'3", 200 pounds, and regularly lift weights. Also, I had a 12-inch kitchen knife, which I drew from my coat pocket and leveled at his throat. He looked at my knife and then back at his and smiled again. Bro, I was just playing. We can just talk right here, bro. Leave me and my boyfriend alone," I said, very quietly, "or I will cut your face off and eat it." What the fuck? I spent 8 years in juvie for stabbing a kid in middle school. I lied to him, but he backed up, putting the knife back in his pocket. I took a step closer, holding my knife level. He backed away, quickly, almost falling on the ice, until he was full sprinting back to his place and I was chasing him down with my knife, until he crossed the street and I stopped, slid the knife in my pocket, and watched him run back to his building. Then I went back up to my bedroom, told my boyfriend I just had to go pee, and fell asleep. So, nameless horny junkie, let's not meet again, or I'll eat your face. I met a guy online, talked for a day or two, but I was at the tail end of my degree and things were getting to be a lot, so I decided no dating until I was done. I let the handful of guys that seemed nice know before deleting the dating app so they would know why I deleted it and wouldn't think I ghosted because of them. He happened to be online when I sent it and said I seemed cool. Can we keep in touch? Sure, no worries. I add him on Facebook. Maybe once a week he's like, "Hey, how are you? What are you up to?" Normal conversation stuff. I chat about uni, work, gym, whatever. After maybe 2 to 3 months, he's like, "Hey, we've been chatting for a bit. Let's grab coffee." I'm like, "Yeah, sure, he seems nice enough." I reiterated it would be as friends, and that was fine with him. I was about to head into exams, so we made plans for in 3 weeks' time after I finished them. He started messaging more and more regularly after making plans. More than once a day, and starts calling it a date, which people call catching up to a coffee date without meaning an actual date. But I wanted to make sure we were still on the same page. So I just said, hey, you keep calling it a date. Just making it sure we are clear it's just a catch up as friends. He snapped, was sending me all sorts of horrible things on Facebook. So I block him. I give him my number, which we had plans though, so he started calling and calling, leaving voicemails. It was late, so I put my phone on silent and went to sleep. Next morning, I wake up to 37 missed calls and voicemails between 10 p.m. continuing until 4 a.m., as well as a multitude of horrible texts. Now this was 7 years ago, when you couldn't just block someone on a phone. At first I thought if I ignored him he would get bored. After about a week, he wasn't slowing down, with dozens of calls a day. I called my phone company to have him blocked. They said you can only block 3 people. Are you sure? I had to jump through all the hoops, and then they turned around and said they can't do it. I have to call the police. So I call the police, and they say I have to call the phone company, but I can make a statement of harassment in case he does something more. 3 weeks later, he's still going strong, but in his text he starts saying he's going to force me on a date with him. I won't have a choice. Then he starts saying that if I won't come to him, he will come to me, and is telling me my schedule with where I will be at any given time, which he put together based on our weekly conversations about normal stuff, threatening to come to where I will be. I have to stop doing my regular activities and pretty much become a hermit. He ended up making a threat to my life. I can't remember what he said word for word, but it was essentially, girls like you get what they deserve, or something like that. But more clearly threatening, he would be the one to make it happen. I contacted the police, and that was enough for an RVO, and I never heard from him again. Oh, and I was 20, but his pictures looked younger, so I didn't realize online, but it turns out this guy was 34. So this wasn't young, dumb kid behavior. This was a grown-ass man. I've had many other psychos since this guy, but I'm very grateful phones have since allowed you to block anyone at any time. In college, I got into a relationship with a guy. He was fine until he found Jesus. He quickly went crazy, claiming demons spoke to him, trying to buy weapons from some shady friends we had, fantasizing about how he would hurt people, and becoming incredibly controlling and physically abusive, nearly killing me a few times. Needless to say, I got out of there. After a few threats and really crazy behavior, he left me alone for a while, and I thought that was that. I was heading to my dorm after a meeting one night when I decided to pass it and go to the student union, which was right down the street, to get some ice cream. As I passed the dorm, I heard steps behind me. I turned around and I thought I saw someone in a white shirt duck behind a big signboard. I kept walking, listening carefully. I heard something move and whipped around again. There, a person staring at me from behind a tree. I couldn't see very well, but it really looked like him. I was mildly freaked out by then, but just walked a little faster. I heard the occasional footsteps and breathing behind me, but I didn't dare stop or let on that I knew someone was there. I knew he owned a gun and would likely put a bullet into me given the chance. He was that psycho and upset that I dared to break up with him. I walked all the way to the union and got some ice cream and just sat there in the store eating, unwilling to go back out into the unit street in case it was my crazy armed ex. I still hadn't mustered the nerve to head back when my phone buzzed. My heart just about fell out of my chest when I saw the message. It was some of my friends, a sweet couple. They had been walking way behind me when they saw something that alarmed them enough to text me. Your ex is following down the street. They called me before I could even text them back. Where are you? Your ex is prowling around here near your dorm. He was coming back from the direction of the Union. I think he had a gun. Was he with you? What's going on? Panicked, I assured them that I had not been with him, but someone who looked like him had been following me and I was at the Union and was too scared to go back alone. They practically yelled at me to stay there and not go anywhere and that they were coming. A few minutes later, they came running into the Union, breathless, eyes wide, asking me why he was by my dorm and what had happened. This was possibly what scared me most of all. The boyfriend, who was a black belt in karate and is never scared, looked absolutely terrified. He was coiled into some kind of fighting stance and looking around wildly, afraid that my ex would appear with his gun. They told me they were taking me back to my dorm and calling the cops. They sandwiched me between them, and we walked back to my dorm as quickly as we dared, the boyfriend walking in front and yelling into the darkness that my ex had better not try anything. I let the two of them into my dorm and we went up to my room, where my roommates put in a frantic call to the police. As we peeked outside the windows facing the street and side of the dorm, there he was, lurking in the trees, looking up. A streetlight reflected something in his hand, something shiny. I saw him tug at the .22. We locked eyes, and I saw something, this kind of rage, in his eyes that froze me. In that moment I knew he really was out to kill me, and my friends and I had foiled him this time. He quickly turned and ran through the trees. We didn't know whether he could come back and try to break in or something, so we called the police again, and lo and behold, sirens within minutes and officers with guns drawn combing the area. They caught him a few hours later, still with the .22 in hand. He confessed he was indeed going to try to kill me if he had the chance, but he didn't want to take potshots at me with my friends there. Apparently, since I had broken up with him, I was given over to Satan, and he had a duty to make sure I died and went to hell. Of course, he went to jail and later to a mental hospital, and I moved out of that dorm a week later. I just couldn't live with the thought that he could break out and come after me again. I got some cop friends to keep an eye on my roommates until they could move out too. I was never really the same after that. I was so afraid and paranoid for years and years. Now, I can be out and about without any fear, but I still have nightmares about him staring at me through the trees, gun in hand and rage in his eyes.